Some new research has come out revealing population growth this year could be lower than World War I. What would this mean to property?
Yeah, look, it is interesting. The University of Queensland, Dr. Alan Charles Edwards came out during the week in the conversation and gave some potential forecasts for this year. And basically what it's showing is that on a worst-case scenario, population growth in Australia goes from 1.4% to 0.4%. So it is actually a lower rate than we've seen since 1916 when we're in the middle of World War I. So it is an incredibly low rate. It is being driven by lower levels of migration, and it does have an impact on a lot of the economy. I mean, if you have a look at things like retail trade, if you have a look at worker access to workforce, there's huge ramifications across the economy. For the property industry, it does impact new development, and if we have a look at the number of households, the new households in Australia, it reduces from around 120,000 this year to under 30,000. So it does have a really big impact on potential new development.
Very interesting stats indeed. What about the highest yields in Australia? I believe they're dominated by the Elizabeths, which is at Northern Adelaide.
Yeah, it's interesting having a lot of investors now are looking at high-yielding properties. I mean, we are in an environment where capital growth is very uncertain and people are a little bit worried about the potential for capital growth. So the focus on yield and the focus on rental return is a big focus. When we have a look across Australian capital cities, we can see that the majority of high-yielding suburbs are really dominated by Northern Adelaide. So particularly Elizabeth, if you have a look at the top 10, most of them have Elizabeth in the name. So they're very cheap suburbs. They don't see much capital growth. So I think if you are an investor, you do need to be mindful that these places do remain fairly low cost. But in terms of a yield, I mean, you can get up to an 8% yield. So it is in terms of a rental return, it is a very positive place to be compared to many parts of Melbourne and Sydney where it's very difficult to get up, more than a 3% yield.
Not seeing any Queensland there on the screen, Nerida?
No. I mean, these are the most extreme. So, I think at the most extreme, the lowest yields are in premium Melbourne and Sydney suburbs, and then the highest yields are really found in very cheap Adelaide suburbs. So it's these are extremes, but there's obviously high and low yielding suburbs across every capital city.
And also, as we've been speaking over the weeks, some of the best examples in the past decade have been Hobart as well.
Yeah, I mean, Hobart has been incredible. I mean, if you have a look at, if you'd bought in Hobart 5 or 6 years ago, not only would you have got a high yield at that time, but also achieved some quite incredible price growth. So, this is the thing with the high-yielding suburbs is that sometimes they can take off. But it does require quite significant economic change in those areas. So obviously Tasmania has seen incredible change over the past 5 years, and that has really accelerated price growth, and that's in Hobart in particular.
And what about regional areas, as we're obviously hearing so many more people working remotely? No doubt those areas are one to watch as well.
Yeah, look at regional Australia is fascinating at the moment. If we have a look on our site on realestate.com.au, we can see northern New South Wales in particular seeing very, very high levels of activity, not just from buyers and renters. Places like the Illawarra doing really well. Also Geelong. Geelong has seen, after Hobart, has had the strongest price growth over the past 3 years of all of Australia. So regional Australia is attracting a lot of interest. People are working very differently at the moment. We don't know whether that will be a permanent shift, but, at this stage, it's very rare for people to go into the office. So, I think that does allow for a greater redistribution of people across Australia and in particular to regional areas.
Yeah, fascinating to watch all of this change, isn't it, Nerida?